Hi, Mark. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jason. Good afternoon. How are you today?
I'm great. Now, Mark, you know that we work on a lot of distracted driving cases, and unfortunately, some of the results of distracted driving can be somewhat catastrophic. But we really wanted to bring you in, a subject matter expert regarding the forensics behind the distracted driving. So that's kind of what we're focusing on today. Tell us the forensics that are involved when someone has a distracted driving case.
Yeah, sure, Jason. Yeah, this is a big problem, affects a lot of people, and as you say, the result, it can be catastrophic
Yeah.
when when this happens. And in terms of the forensics, I mean, what I do is I get the records from the carrier. Actually, the lawyer is the one who's going to subpoena those records and give them to me. And normally, these carrier records will have information about what activity was going on the phone at that time,
I
and it's a
see.
matter of going through the records and looking at what was happening. And it's not always cut and dry and clear cut, because you think you just look and see the accident happened at 12:03 and at 12:02 there was a text or something like that. It the carriers all give different types of information. There's not standard information that's given out,
Right.
and the carriers don't always record the information at the same times, or it could be varied when information gets entered into the record. So sometimes you can have a situation where the carrier, your phone and the cell tower are just communicating, and that may be logged as a communication, but it was not user initiated.
Oh, I see. So
And then I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just wondering if there was like a difference in terms of data, right? So, obviously we think as data is data sometimes. When you get a phone bill, it says data, right? But when it comes down to the forensics behind it, does it decipher between like Google Maps, or if you're using Waze, or if it's a text message, or if you're actually on the phone, will it kind of decipher between those type of data points?
Yeah, that's a good thing to point out, because something like Google Maps you can use and your phone can be sending data back and forth, but
Right.
it's not, the user doesn't have any input into that. It's just going on and you're looking at your map and it's using it to help you drive down the road. Uh, but other things, I mean, they can, other apps might do things differently. Different companies are going to record things differently. And then it's important too, if there's an event that happens that you think you may need this data, or you may want this information, is to acquire it quickly from the carrier, because a lot of times the carriers don't keep all this information forever. As time goes by, it gets more and more granular, and they'll have less and less information about the individual items that are going on in terms of the phone's communication.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. There's just so much I want to ask you about that. I just can't wait. What? Because this is super interesting. Because what about like cellular data when you're on the phone? But technically, what if it's like hands free and you're actually using Bluetooth with that? Is that something that's marked on the data?
yeah, it sometimes is, and sometimes you don't know for sure. Sometimes
Nice.
you would only know there was a data transmission at this time, and you were at this location. If it's something like a text, you may know, it would say that it would give the type of data, and sometimes it's discernible, sometimes it's not. I mean, it depends on the carrier. Sometimes you'll know exactly what it was, and it depends on the time that's elapsed too, from when the event occurred to when you actually get the records. So it,
I
it
see.
really depends what you'll know and what's in there.
So also regarding the actual phone itself, when it will also would it also show data points of the GPS in terms of location of the phone at the time of the accident too, to pinpoint the defendant in a particular location.
Right, yeah, the phone itself is another source of information to understand about what happened before, what was happening right when the accident happened. So you have the phone itself, and then you have the records from your carrier, and both of those can
Right.
be analyzed to get a really to try to get as much information as you can as to what was actually happening.
So, Mark, when would people hire you to help them with their case?
Yeah, so people hire me. I work for a plaintiff and the defense lawyers, and they hire me when they have cases that might deal in civil liability and criminal cases.
Mm.
So on the civil liability side, I work on things like electrocutions, communication systems failures, and someone gets hurt, appliance and electronics faults where someone gets hurt or causes property damage, and even things like medical electronics. And electromagnetic interference is a big thing that happens and is often overlooked when you have all these different electronic devices and they do interfere and cause problems and cause things to go wrong. That's another really interesting topic. And then on the criminal side, I work on cases that involve normally cell records, either from the cell tower or the carrier or the phone itself, to help understand someone's location at the time of a crime, say.
Now, to understand the location part, right? So you have these cell towers. So the cell towers is the actual location that pings your phone. Is that how you kind of determine in terms of how far that person's location is to a particular cell tower?
Yeah, you can get a lot of different information from the carrier records. A lot of times you can get GPS information, which is the most accurate and gives the best picture of where someone was at a given time. But after time, as I said, some of these records they're purged, or they're made more granular to see for the carriers to keep all that information around. It's just too much. So sometimes you'll have information about which cell tower you connected to, and then maybe which sector. And then as you drive around town, your phone is communicating not just with the tower that you're connected to at that time for a call or just the closest one. It also connects to the nearby ones, because handoffs occur when you move from the range of one tower to another. So your phone is in contact with several towers at the same time.
So we have this whole 5G conversion thing, right? You might not know the answer to this, but giving us your Beth hypothesis, there was some talk about airplane companies being very concerned about this whole 5G interfering with some of their instruments on the airplane. What types of concerns do you experts have regarding the interference with the crossover to 5G?
In terms of the crossover to 5G, so when we're talking the I guess true 5G, which is at frequencies
Yes.
at about 30 gigahertz, which that's not completely rolled out. In some cities it is, but they operate at a much different frequency than the 4G systems that we have now, much higher frequency where these 5G systems have. And I'm not aware of the studies that have been done yet on these frequencies and the interference impacts of them. These 5G frequencies at about 25 gigahertz or 30 gigahertz. They haven't been studied a whole lot as all the other frequencies that we've been using for decades now. These higher frequencies require a much more expensive device, and they're much more expensive to manufacture because of the very high frequency.
Right. So maybe that's why they're concerned about it, because there's a lack of studies out there and they're fearing the unknown. I guess that's a big part of it.
Yeah, it's definitely an area for study and for understanding, and the public really doesn't know and doesn't have a lot of information. And even on our current systems, the FCC did studies, and for different medical agencies did studies back in the mid-90s, I believe, on the health hazards of RF radiation. And the RF radiation that a person would receive from these towers is in the 90s is much different than what it's like today. And the exposure time is different. In the 90s, maybe we had pagers and things like that versus phones that send data and video and text and all that. So the RF environment is much different now than what it was. And there's definitely need for more study and more understanding.
Mark, I'm going to ask you kind of a big question. I got to close this out. So what is something that you as an expert wish that people in the public understood about forensics that is just generally misunderstood?
I think there's a conception that a lot of times that it might be cynical that you hire somebody to say something. Like if you're for the defense, you want to hire a guy who's going to say, "Oh yeah, my guy's innocent here. That's why I hired this guy to say." And where I come in is it's not like that at all. A lot of times I don't know what happened, but there's evidence that's available, and my job is to look at the evidence and bring that to the attorney and say, this is what I find. This is my engineering opinion of what happened here. And sometimes that opinion supports your case, and you'll want to hear from me and have me write a report. Sometimes it doesn't, and you might not want to have a report or from me on that. So, I mean, it goes either way, that I get hired and I just present the facts and let the judge and the jury and the fact finder decide.
It's excellent. That's a great response. Well, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jason. Have a great afternoon.